Okay, let's get started. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the July listening sessions for the California Truth and Healing Council. Today is the Northern California listening session, with Central tomorrow, Southern Wednesday, Eastern on Thursday, and a regular business meeting of the Council on Friday at 1 p.m. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor for Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started and before we have some intros from our council members and our staff, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the land, or that the land I'm joining you from is the homelands of the Patwin peoples. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics and preliminary business for today's meeting. First, we're recording this listening session, and it's available for public participation via Zoom and dial-in. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at California Truth and Healing Council Updates blog, and that email now is catruthandhealing, all spelled out, .com, and that's catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of the Tribal Advisor on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you have not already done so, we'd appreciate if you could update your name and let us know who you are. And we're going to start, as always, with a quick overview to get everyone up to speed on recent updates, and then we'll go into the listening session portion of today's convening. If you'd like to speak at any point, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. And if you're using the Zoom app, you should be able to raise your hand using the app controls. But you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you've dialed in, you should be able to raise your hand by pressing *9. You may also email written comments to info@catruthandhealing.com at your convenience. And now, before we begin, I'd like to remind participants that all of our council members, council staff, and many of you that are participating today are members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council, our office, and each other with respect and your whole heart and a healing mindset. Many of us are doing this work, are navigating systems that weren't built for us to make change that was never contemplated. So thank you again for joining us. And I will have, I think, first, Councilmember Bojorquez, who is on, and any other council members who have joined us. Please feel free to introduce yourself and say a few words. And again, for those of you, as a reminder, we do have a waiting room for security purposes, but we are not keeping people out. So Councilmember Bojorquez, if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Mishistu, good day. Inka Tekarak, Isaac Bojorquez. I'm Aloni Costanoan. From the Carmel area, and I'm just grateful to be here and glad so many of you were able to join us and took some time out of your afternoon. Look forward to today's discussion and hearing from the community, and it is an honor to represent our community for the council. So please reach out at any time, whether it's through this listening session or through any of the other outlets that we have to be able to gather your information. Definitely appreciate it. Shururu.
Thank you, Councilmember. Loretta, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Loretta Miranda. I am Serrano and Cupeño. I'm a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Southern California. I'm happy to see some familiar names and faces, and welcome to everyone if this is your first session. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great, and if there's anybody else who'd like to introduce themselves, please feel free at this time. Otherwise, we'll get right into it. And again, as always, we've got Michael on, who is so wonderful and helps keep us organized from our office as well. Okay, hearing no one jumping in, what we'll do is go into our overview presentation, and then once we get through part of that, we're going to open up for any just general comments, questions, and concerns. And then we'll go through some questions that we have for all of you that we'd like to hear from the community about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. And are you seeing the slide view or the presenter view? Slide view, all good, okay.
Yeah.
Okie doke. So, and there, I have a typo, so I apologize for that. We have the listening session agenda is an overview of the council and its charge, the July council meeting agenda. Then we'll go through some updates, and then we'll open up for listening and discussion if there's anybody who had anything that they wanted to share specifically with this group before we go into the questions for the public that we have prepared to go through. So what is the California Truth and Healing Council? The council is a council made up of representatives of California Native American tribes charged with bearing witness to recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives to clarify the historical relationship between the state and the California Native Americans in the spirit of truth and healing. The council will submit a final written report of findings to the governor's office by 2025. The final report should reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state. And the final report may also make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration and consider how to prevent similar depredations and or policies in the future. The council is organized under a charter and is made up of voting members and non-voting members. The voting members have not decided whether or if they want or how to include non-voting members. So that's something that they're going to be thinking about as they move forward. And there are 12 voting members from each of the 4 regions with 1 seat for a non-federally recognized tribal designee in each region. Again, I do want to remind folks because this has come up a bit previously. This makeup is our attempt to create some diversity between different statuses, different regions, but again, it's not meant to displace community members, individual Native people, people of Native descent who may lack status. And so it's just our best guess at a proxy for a group that will receive narratives from all people of California Native descent. The council welcomes and encourages all available methods for public participation, and participants are encouraged to attend and observe all meetings of the council, with the exception of any closed session proceedings, if that ends up being something that the council does. Submit written statements to the council, make oral statements and testimony to the council, participate in interactive dialogues, panel discussions, and informal meetings, organize and host affiliate events on issues relevant to the work of the council, and join the work of the subcommittee. If you're a California Native American tribe, and those are tribes that are on the NAHC contact list, but even if you're not on the contact list and you feel that you should be consulted with as a tribe, we are seeking to do in-person consultations where you're comfortable, but can also accommodate conference call and Zoom. And even if you'd like to have a quick call to get just a one-on-one overview of how your tribe might engage, what your tribe's specific needs are without having the consultation about the specific issues that your tribe has historically faced with the state. And it's more of, hey, for us to be able to engage with this properly, this is the kind of thing that we think we might need, whether it's accommodation on the weekends to have meetings, or whether it's, you know, our tribe really needs to have a full-time person in-house, and then we can pass those needs along to the funding partners that we have. But you can reach out to info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov if your tribe is ready to meet in person, and we can make those meetings happen. We're flexible about the method and mode of meetings, and meetings will be recorded and transcribed. Looks like we have something in the chat, so let me just take a look. Oh, that's our email. Thanks, Michael. Tribes may share as much or as little as they're comfortable with. And outside of tribal consultation, the council and the tribal advisor are available to meet with the Native American individuals, organizations, and groups at their request. The council is currently meeting on a monthly basis, which is virtual until further guidance is issued from the state. So this is a little bit fudgy. So The council can potentially meet in person, but for the near term is able to meet virtually, and we haven't seen an end date for that yet. So until the state says that we can't, because most of the meetings are business meetings and are going through documents and the like, we will be doing virtual for now. The idea in future is to have as much availability for engagement as possible. So we would like to do something that's hybrid so that there's in-person, which we think is incredibly important for place setting for these kinds of discussions, but then also want to make sure that folks that can't be in person are still able to participate meaningfully in these spaces. So, but for the remainder of 2021 or until the council decides otherwise, to set up the foundations for the council's work, the next meeting dates are July 23rd, which is this Friday, August 20th, September 17th, October 22nd, November 19th, and then there's no, we decided to give the council and ourselves a bit of a break in December with the idea that we would shift into the quarterly meeting dates that were contemplated under the charter in 2022. The agenda, again, is quite lengthy, but what we've done for this meeting, and again, I need to update some of the formatting, so I apologize. Mondays always get the first crack at the new presentation, so we'll work out those kinks for tomorrow. But the agenda we have reorganized so that we can get to some of the items that I know the community has been waiting on. And so we'll do our regular welcome, roll call, traditional opening, approval of minutes, and then council member updates if there's any updates. And then we'll also do an overview of the public and community engagement and input that we got from this meeting, but then also from some of the prior ones. So what we'll do is go through the overview documents that are prepared from these meetings so that everybody on the council who wasn't able to attend can have kind of the same baseline of what the community was talking about all week. We'll then have a budget update, and then we'll go through the subcommittees. We'll start with an update from the existing committees, and then we'll go into status and identity, which will include discussions of disenrollment and recognition, education, which could include K through 12 and higher education broken up, or may have some overlap with the existing academic partnership subcommittee. So we'll have a discussion about that. Potentially elders, and then any others that the council would like to discuss. We'll then go through the draft public engagements and public relations guidelines and process overview. Council member code of ethics draft overview, which the council will get the red lines and will be able to kind of think about and work through again this Friday. And then respectful engagement in meetings and listening sessions draft overview. We'll then go through next meeting dates and topics and have public comment, which will start promptly at 3 p.m. and go either until 4 p.m. or until public comment ends. So updates for this group. Due to the budget impacts and uncertain outlook of COVID-19, the 2020-21 enacted budget included $100,000 annually through 2024-25 to support stipends for council members, provide culturally appropriate wellness services for quarterly meetings, and live stream meetings and transcribe meetings and consultations. And so based on the fact that it wasn't quite certain whether there would be any further assistance and what the impacts to the budget of COVID-19 would be, there was a scaled back budget that would ensure that even if nothing else came in, at least minimum baseline community engagement could happen. The enacted 2021-22 budget, which again is, some of it is still in the works, but this piece has been authorized, includes an additional $350,000 annually, so $450,000 total that would go to the following activities, which are coordinating research, compilation, and consolidation of all known resources available within the State Library and Archives at the direction of and for presentation to the Truth and Healing Council. compiling and composing a report of findings and recommendations aimed at reparation and or restoration at the direction of the council for presentation to the governor's office pursuant to the executive order. And then council and office travel for consultations, meetings, and subcommittee work. It also includes a provision that splits the tribal advisor role from the executive secretary role from the Native American Heritage Commission, so that I can dedicate more time to this, and so that the NAHC can also be fully staffed to be able to the work that is critical to its mission. Some brief updates from subcommittees. The Academic Partnerships Subcommittee met and recommends targeted outreach to academic partners to refine its approach. It's first developing a mission and a vision statement to be able to do this so that people know exactly what they're partnering with. And then it'll meet with the State Library and Archives in the near term, I think in the next month, to assist in scoping the work of the council. And so with all of this, the subcommittee had kind of a chicken and egg situation of do we get partners and then figure out how much work there is to do, or do we look at what we have already and then think about how to scope out and how to ask partners to assist with that work that we know generally what we're looking at. So they're going to go see what is available within the State Library and Archives to kind of figure out what's already available within the state resources, and then we'll think about how to engage academic partners, whether through fellowships, whether through literature, research, and the like, and then we'll be more targeted in its outreach to academic partners. That said, if there are academic partners that do want to proactively offer services or are doing research, the Academic Partnerships Subcommittee was formed for that purpose as well. So they're happy to engage any academic partners that are wanting to do that now. The Youth Council Subcommittee met again and also seeks additional community engagement to address outstanding questions. And so they'll be going out into the community and they'll be talking about the kinds of things that the Youth Council could be, but with the idea that we're really interested in hearing from youth about what their needs might be and what they might want from this council. And then the Funding Partnerships Subcommittee was formed and will meet with the council's funding partner organization in the near term. Other subcommittees currently under consideration are the following. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and if there's anybody who has anything that they'd like to say at this time, we'll open it up for discussion. If folks want to introduce themselves and discuss, what they are thinking about in this space, we can do that as well. So I'm going to stop sharing now. One update I did want to mention, because it's related to this, but is not within the purview of the council, though the council could feed into it and also could work collaboratively with it, is the California Indian Heritage Center, which is in the process of being developed under the purview of a task force that includes several tribal leaders, community leaders, and the State Parks Department. And that is currently in the process of, it's narrowed down the potential design build firms that it will work with. Those will be made public this week at some point, and then they'll narrow down further to land on a final design build firm. Once that firm is in place, that task force and the firm will collectively do an enormous amount of community engagement. So for those of you that were thinking about that and where it's at, that's where it is. And so nobody has missed an opportunity to come in at the ground floor. We're just getting all of the pieces together to be able to move forward on that. So I will stop talking and I will leave it open if anybody would like to introduce themselves, what their hopes are for the council, anything that they've been thinking about. And I will also make sure that I'm admitting folks from the waiting room. And Loretta, is there anything that I missed that you think we should bring up?
I think perhaps, so we have a Google Forms document that, in case you want to write written comments, I'll go ahead and put that link in the chat. But other than that, you've got it covered. Oh, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Okay. And then another thing I wanted to mention is we did see that there is some support for this council examining some of the impacts of boarding schools in California. So I did want to not ignore that that is something that is out there and that the council could consider, but also potentially they would probably want to look at that within the scope of their charge. And so I know that several families have been impacted in California by that legacy, and so it would be helpful, I think, for the council to get some cross collaboration with the feds potentially to understand, you know, how the state potentially encouraged, supported, benefited from that legacy as well. Ken, would you like to unmute your line?
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right. Yes, I think I brought up that issue about the boarding schools, and I think we discussed it that all three government agencies were responsible: the county, the state, and the feds. Being that my mother went to boarding school in Reno, a lot of tribal members went there. And what they found in Canada was pretty much told to me at the same time that they would find them in Carson City. And I think the federal government's looking into those areas. I do have some of the school records, and it looks like they've been cleansed. My mother ran away several times and never found a note or any kind of information on her school records. The other thing is, a lot of records are held at the archives. You need to create some sort of association with the National Archives, because a lot of our records are federal and very few are state. That's my recommendation, creating two areas, especially with the archives. It's hard to go to the places that hold records. Riverside, Berkeley, San Bruno, Minnesota. So there's a lot of information that needs to be looked at. State Archives has some great information. I already received a lot of letters from the governor. But yeah, I think we really should look at the boarding schools. They were very, very possessive. They took my mother for 4 to 5 years. Uncles, cousins, aunts. And it wasn't a good experience, as far as I could tell by the letters that were written and report cards. So I think that's something major that should be looked at. I brought it up maybe a month ago or maybe 2 months ago, before this all came out. Anyway, so I'm done. I think we should look at the boarding schools and also open the door to the National Archives to get some more records, because I didn't know my family tree was written down by the Congress required them to verify that we're natives in California for the judgment rolls. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, we appreciate it. And I think the upside in the budget, at least, is that we'll now have someone who can start doing those proactive partnerships and figuring out how to piece together all of the research and the archives and the information that does exist. So very much appreciate it. And Loretta put some information for those that are not aware of it. The feds did announce a boarding school initiative where they're going to look at the legacy of the federal government's role in Indian boarding schools across the country. And so Loretta put some information on that in the chat as well.
Christina?
Yes.
Hi. I thought I'd introduce myself, just seems timely at this point. I'm Molly Arthur. I'm here in Northern California. I've come to most of your meetings, and Christina and I met some years ago at the Genocide Conference in San Diego. And I'm now working with a small grassroots group who is currently calling ourselves Catholics for Boarding School Accountability. And we're in response to the request by NABS to respond as a church to what the history is. And specifically, our Catholic response is to put ourselves to help Catholic congregations. Our first point is to look at the religious congregations, whether male or female, and ask them to make their database and their files and archives available. And we're doing webinars and teaching. That's very much our first endeavor to work with this. There is a resolution that we wrote that was publicized last week by the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, LCWR, to support the opening of the archives by religious organizations. So there is fast-moving work that is meant to be accountable to what should be brought forth publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And it strikes me that if there is a logical organization or group that this council could get some updates and liaise with, I think that would be helpful for them as well.
Great. I can send you our information. And there's other forming groups, and it will be growing, developing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to apologize to this group if I'm a bit all over the place today. You can't tell I have a different setup with a different setup in front of me, so I'm still getting used to where everything is at. We have in the chat from Kathy, and continues to bring forward the concerns of natives that have been disenrolled from their tribes and those from unrecognized tribes or have not been recognized by their own tribes. So thank you, Kathy, and we appreciate your continuing to join this effort, even if it feels a bit slow moving. So Ken, your hand is still raised, but you are welcome to jump in again if you like, or I can unraise your hand if you are done.
I'm trying to figure out how to unraise it.
I can unraise it for you.
Oh, thank you.
Oop. I know what I'm doing. Hi, Christina. I'm back for the 18th millionth time. Anyway, just a quick update on the healing process for us California Indians on the educational background. AB 1554 is moving along. It's we've got it going through most of the channels to be part of, be put on the approval by January, hopefully. We have been talking with CTA with getting their backing for the bill also. Also, AB 338, the Universero statute ideas have been going through also. I think it just passed the Senate. And again, it's all with what Assembly Member Ramos has been doing on our behalf. And just a quick question to Molly. Hopefully your organization is looking to St. Boniface, the Catholic Indian boarding school in Banning, California. My father went there, and I haven't had any records to look at, but he was there in the lower grades, then moved to Palm Springs High School afterwards. But I'm still looking for any kind of a documentation of if anything happened to him at St. Boniface. But that's something you might want to put on your radar. Also, we've got another friend, well, I guess friend, she's my wife, but anyway, she's on the CTA State Council now and is going on the instructional quality board for CDE, along with Assembly Member Ramos. So again, with anything in terms of the healing part, educating our children now, K through 12, I think we've got two pretty good voices that can help us heal whatever needs to be healing for our students in the grades K through 12. So just a quick update, and again, it's always fun to see you and Loretta and everybody else. So that's my blurb. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good to see you as always. It also strikes me from what you just mentioned that it might be helpful for our group, once we have it kind of assembled, to work with the church on records generally, just because a lot of, at least Southern California, and I mean that by like Sonoma down, those records are pretty much primarily within local church areas.
Right. Another thing, Molly, are you an official spokes organization for the church?
No.
Are you officially tied to the diocese?
No.
Oh, okay. So
sorry. So we, being grassroots, it's kind of like we are an outlier group in some way, but we have a Jesuit seminarian and a Dominican nun and members of other religious congregations. One that is the St. Joseph of Carondelet, who I think ran St. Boniface.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So it's just such a beginning level of. So yeah, we're not in the hierarchy.
Okay.
And that's
do you have
kind
any
of on purpose.
Do you have any California Indians in the administration?
We are working to determine how we have our accountability partners. Is that what you're asking? At this point, we are, Catholics trying to make sure that we are aware, conscious, and doing something to teach all other Catholics as much as possible.
Yeah,
and
you're in luck because we have a lot of Catholics too that might.
Oh Lord, no, because I was raised Catholic until I went to college, and in college, I went back to the paganism that is my my religion so far. So I was just wondering if any Catholic California Indians were involved in the administration of, how you're going to answer the questions, who are you going to ask, when are you going to ask? So you get a tribal identity, because a lot of times historically, I'm a history teacher. It's been overstepped in terms of that assimilation process. So just be careful. I mean, a lot of times, I just had a tribal council meeting last Saturday, and we were talking about you don't tell everybody everything. And I remember my father and my uncle and my aunt, Catherine C. Sabo, just saying, sometimes we tell them what they want to hear, and sometimes we don't tell them because they're not privy to it. There's something we don't explain to people. So there's a lot of items that have been left out. So I'm just, culturally aware of what's going on in terms of the organization to help the healing process. Because again, that's what I'm trying to do in terms of education. So okay, cool. Well, thank you.
And I'm just saying that we would like to consider having I think we got the language here from this council, the accountability partners from Councilwoman Kusla, that yes, we know we need to have Indigenous partners involved in this. So if we thought their would be someone willing to do that with our group, I'd like to understand who they may be and see if they're.
Okay. Yeah, good idea. Also with boarding schools, Sherman Indian High School, which again, both my parents worked at, and I worked at as a teacher for a couple of years back in the day. You know, they're archived pretty good through UCR. So if anybody's looking for parents or grandparents or relatives who went to Sherman, you know, Lori Sasquatch at the Sherman Indian Museum is a good person to get a hold of. And I mean, she's a one-person bandwagon in terms of any kind of historical archiving that if anybody on board here needs to look up. So just another FYI for everybody. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This is a great conversation. One thing, because Teddy is on, that I wanted to mention and now I've put Teddy on the spot, but you don't have to weigh in, but just putting this, I'm right next to a very busy intersection, so I apologize. Just putting this out there is that the Academic Partnership Subcommittee has thought a bit about, and this also actually is related to some of what Robert's doing, is thought about the gaps and the needs for California Native students and whether that data exists, what it is, where it can be found, and whether the state has anything like that. One thing that I mentioned to them was what the ACLU did up in Northern California, where they were looking at the gap for students in Humboldt and had a report that came out of that, because that was largely, I think, driven locally and privately with the ACLU. And so we were thinking about different ways that could be done more globally throughout the state. So if anyone has ideas, or if Teddy, you do, oh, here's the report.
Here's the report in the chat. Yeah, hi everyone, this is Teddy. I'm the Indigenous Justice Advocate at the ACLU of Northern California. And we worked, as Christina was saying, closely with tribes and tribally led organizations in Humboldt County, specifically because we've had a presence there for some time around disparities in outcomes for Indigenous students, and then really trying to link those to the history of education for Native students, and think about recommendations and proposals for how to begin to address those things, curriculum, visibility, all those kinds of things. And I think we would love to talk with the subcommittee about doing something like this on a statewide level. We've had folks from the Central Valley now, as well as another one of the far north state counties, and a coalition group in LAUSD who are interested in the same kind of in doing this same research of pulling together all of the data, figuring out what the real issues are at the local level, but also this isn't failures of the educational system is not something that is specific to a school or a school district, and that is really clear.
Awesome. So I will maybe reach out to you to loop you into their conversations as well.
I'm back again. Teddy's got me thinking about this educational process. You know, and I've been a history teacher for 40 years, teaching both AP and college prep US history. And I taught for 3 years at Sherman Indian High School and another 2 or 3 over at Notre Dame High School. And then the other 34 years at Upland High School, the public school. And what I've seen, and I've been the past chairperson for the American and Alaskan Native Caucus for California Teachers Association. For me, I think it's a simple solution, is that we recruit more Indian students to go to college and become Indian educators. I mean, it's simple, but it's difficult. And Christina has heard this spew for the past, 2 months we've been doing this.
You're making me consider a career change, honestly.
Well, you know, I just don't see it. I mean, I see it happening, but it's going to be a long road. Like I mentioned before, I mean, you've heard me talk about it. Is like it's going to take 3 or 4 generations to even think about this occurring. you know, there's also that other report that came out of, gosh, what's it called? From boarding schools to, it's out of Sac State and San Diego State. It's about a 2 or 3 year old report. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is that there's 2%, I believe, of the teachers in the state of California, 2% are American Indian, California Indian, and nationwide there's 5%. And you know, I was just on the NIEA, National Indian Education Association, with on their whatever website, looking at, you know, trying to get more students to become educators, and especially, you know, going back to that report, is talking about the high suicide dropout rate of middle school and junior high California Indian, American Indian students. So, you know, if we had a role model, geez, you know, and I've had a couple of kids in my class, you know, that, you know, I'm American Indian, and one was from Pachanga, and, you know, she was all excited that she actually, oh my God, you're American Indian, because, you know, they look at me, they come in the classroom, you know, you're a Hispanic. I'm like, no, American Indian. And then we had, and this student was blonde haired and blue eyed. I'm going, yeah, Cherokee princess, sure you are. And she pulled out her Pachanga ID card. I'm going, hey, Pachanga, I know people down there. So anyway, so she was all excited about having an American Indian teacher, California Indian teacher, because she was Luceño from Pachanga. But again, you know, Teddy, if you could work up there, because, you know, I heard Chico is supposed to have a really darn good American Indian program. If you guys from Humboldt and Chico can send some of your teachers down our way, that would be great, because again, you could develop curriculum all we want, and especially I'm developing curriculum for the ethnic studies portion of the ethnic studies requirement program that's going to go in to California high schools in 2 years. If you don't have an Indian teacher to teach it, it's going to lose something. And again, talking with non-Indian teachers, they're basically saying, hey, the best thing we can do is kids coming out of that portion, that component, just going, damn, it sucks to be Indian, which, you know, I've heard that before. But again, we really, really need to recruit more Indian students to become Indian educators. And you know, as simple as it sounds, it's going to be a long road. But again, you know, that's what I'm doing. I'm retired. I get to go to all these universities and Cal States and mention just, hey, get some kids to go in the Indian education program. And then hopefully they'll start doing that. But again, you know, Teddy, you sparked a little spark with me today, so it's all good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And Teddy, not to put you on the spot again, while actually just putting you on the spot, while I was looking to find the report that Robert was just mentioning, I came across gold chains. Are you able to chat about that at all?
Yeah, so that's another link I should put in the chat. Gold Chains is a kind of a micro site that ACLU NorCal, working closely with KQED and one other major community partner who I'm unfortunately going to forget, and really trying to retell and tell much more truthfully the story of California, as people think of California as a non-slave state. That just is historically completely inaccurate and untrue. And so right now it has a collection of some kind of firsthand stories and some other stories and accounts of enslavement, both of people of African descent as well as California Indians, and then some of the stories of some of the extreme violence and massacres that happened across the state, and then some of the stories of resistance. And it's very much a work in progress, and I think it would be really cool to work with community members and folks on the council to expand that. I mean, one of the benefits of doing it with KQED and an organization like the one that I work for is there's a lot of name recognition, for better or worse. So it's a way to kind of use that platform to push out information to people who might not otherwise know it, because it's just not part of the public discourse.
Awesome, thank you. And this is very cool. So I encourage everyone to take a look at this website that's in the chat.
I found it. It's
Boarding school to suspension boards is what.
That's it.
Let me find a link.
Thank you, because I'm not that tech savvy.
And I will throw in there too that I think it's not just educators in the sense that you would think, you know, someone who is gotten their, you know, who's like a teacher in the classroom, but also like after school programs.
Title VII.
Yeah, all of it. Anybody who's interfacing with youth, because that's actually what made me do this in law. Was I was working an after school program, and I had a similar experience working in Riverside, where a Native youth ended up, we had a whole conversation, and she had never really talked to anybody about the fact she was Native. And so
yeah, and that's the fun thing with, you know, teaching at Sherman. I was almost teaching to the choir, and then it's not so much that, you know, we do need to educate ourselves about who we are, because as Teddy was saying, when you're talking about, you know, why didn't we come in as a slave state? Well, because you had California Indians as slaves. You didn't need African American slaves. You had us as slaves. So why come in as, you know, perpetuate that argument between slave states and non-slave states at the time? And also you're looking at the boarding schools again. You know, like I said, Sherman's, I think with Lori there, I think they'll be pretty transparent. I don't think they're gonna be. That's just me knowing Lori and knowing the archives that somebody may want to look at. But yeah, it's a good movement in terms of looking at, because you're talking about data. Everybody's data driven, because, you know, God forbid you listen to a 40-year-old retired teacher who's been teaching, you know, and looking at Native kids. You know, my kids went to the public school, so you know, there is a great need, you know, looking at where they went, and they were maybe 2 or 3 other American Indian students at that high school. Whereas, you know, my boarding school at Notre Dame High School, you know, I was the only Indian there. And then I became there's another Indian came after I was there, and that was my little brother. And so we were the only 2 Indians at the school. So we were kind of like, you know, get the old stereotype. Do you live in teepees? You know, that kind of attitude. But yeah, so far so good.
thank you. Additional comments, questions? Okay, there is a comment in the chat asking about resources for non-federally recognized tribes to get recognition, and then also language preservation, and that they're having issues with getting funding because of the recognition status. They're Northeastern Pomo, and just figuring out where to start. We don't have any resources off the top of our head, but this is actually a really good, this is the type of thing that we want to hear in the council because of our funding partnerships. This is something that philanthropy can think about, is how to get resources equitably to different tribes with different statuses. So if recognition is the barrier to equitable access to language resources, then that's something that the funding partnerships group can think about. So that is a long answer that says that I do not have anything for you right now, but we, this group can start thinking about that. And language preservation general, and the kind of funds that could be available as a restorative or reparative piece of some type of budget or private funding. And if you're comfortable sharing more about the constraints you're seeing with accessing funding sources, we'd love to hear more about that too, because I think part of this group, the charge is to think about how to create wholeness for California and Native peoples of Native descent. And so if lack of status is preventing tribes, people, individuals from preserving and restoring languages and having the same kind of access to funds that would allow for that. We know some tribes have a Rosetta Stone, some don't. And so I think, so don't know where to start to get funding. So, okay, so it's also understanding how to navigate funding. Okay. And the linguist you're talking about, okay, I guess I don't need so many details. I'm just individually curious here, because it's in my neck of the woods too. Oh, okay, Alex. So you're talking about our tribe then. Alex Walker, I think you are speaking about. Okay, yeah, so I think that maybe it's also figuring out how to create equitable access to funding availability even, because we even have issues, I think, at the state and the federal level with sorry, I'm reading the chat at the same time, so I'm getting distracted. But we also have issues with getting general access and ease of access to tribes generally, I think. So I think that council could recommend ways of accessing these pieces, or recreating eligibility to get to the actual need here. So I'm just thinking out loud and I'm taking notes.
Christina, when it comes to obviously language and language preservation and funding, ICLES is a good resource. There's so much that's out there. Just recently, the BIA, they had their language grant that went out nationwide, which a few California tribes were able to partake in that. Definitely, I think just collaborating, reaching out, and that's why I think ICLES would be such a great start as they host Breath of Life there at Berkeley. There's so many linguist partners that are there, and they have those doorways into different fundings. So I think reaching out to Carly Text, she is on the board of directors there for ICLES. That would be a good contact person for people engaging in language.
And what is the place you're saying? It sounds like an acronym, potentially.
Is ICLES is, and I'm probably going to get it all wrong, it's the Advocates for Language Indigenous Survival. And like I said, I probably got that backwards.
Great. I'll try to find a link to put it in the chat. And I found it. Oh, and someone's picture is on the landing page. I'm calling out Councilmember Bojorquez. If you didn't know you're on the landing page, you are.
I did not. That's good to know.
Front and center. Great. Okay, we're getting some additional. This is a huge issue for many non-federally recognized tribes, especially Wapchumni. Okay, and then some other suggestions in the chat. So it looks like there's some good cross-pollination. And also a reason why some of these subcommittees could actually be a really good resource for sharing constraints, but then also sharing resources. So additional comments, questions, concerns? Anyone want to introduce themselves to the group? Okay, well, we're at a good spot, I think, to go through some of the questions. And I'm going to go backwards this time so that we get to the older, or like the questions that haven't been as addressed in these meetings. And then we'll kind of work from there. Let's see. And again, I am just dealing with some. Okay. And Loretta had to jump, but she will be in and out of this week's listening session. She is working on Native American Day planning concurrently to this. So just so that you're all aware, we are having Native American Day. The plan is to be in person at the Capitol. And so that is where she is at. But it will be scaled back this year. So just for folks that are thinking about it. Okay. So this is kind of what, and if you have this open, you can also do a grid view by kind of sliding across the middle bar so that you can see people's faces as well. So one of the questions, and we haven't gotten to this, but what are the needs of the community in engaging in the work of the council that are not currently funded? And let me open up my chat just so that I can make sure that I see what everybody's saying. And this includes, you know, at a tribal level, what's not funded for your tribe. You know, whether it's because I think the aim of this council and I think of the state's approach to all of this is that there's, you know, there's clearly a lot of inequity in California Indian country. Recent developments have helped tribes help themselves, but in a way that we're seeing is also increasing inequity in some spaces. And so, you know, some tribes have, you know, full budgets for travel and engagement with state and federal engagement or with other tribes or with other organizations. So are there needs on a tribal level of, you know, whether it's travel to get to these listening sessions, whether it's, you know, research support so that your tribe can piece together the pieces that you'd like to be included in this holistic report. Great, sorry, I got distracted by the chat again. So, and then organizational, you know, are you part of an organization that would like to be doing some work aligned with the council, but want to make sure that, you know, we're all rowing in the same direction and that we're all doing it in a way that's aligned? One of the things that one of our funding partnerships council members brought up in one of our calls was, you know, there's other Native groups that really rely on private funding and want to make sure that those aren't getting, you know, that this effort is not pulling from those efforts. We are very cognizant of that, and that is partially why, you know, we have chosen not to create a giant budget, at least internally. We can ask for more if there needs to be more to do this work well, but really want to make sure that those organizations that are doing work that is like aimed at this kind of thing, whether it's, you know, creating more scholarships for Native students, whether it's creating more grant opportunities for tribal nations throughout the state, whether it's getting emergency materials to folks or whether it's addressing disparities in the child welfare system. All of that should not be pulled away from, because all of that actually is part of this bigger work. So I want to make sure that where there are needs organizationally that this council can help amplify that. And then individual needs, you know, are there, again, travel, are there stipends that your elders might want in order to engage in some of this work? Or are there things like just general wellness services that could be funded outside of the mechanism of the council? And then are there recommended communications partners that the council may want to work with to help spread the word. And this is really, Loretta and I would really appreciate having a bit of help on daily comms. So if there's anybody that people recommend that are good at engaging with the Native community in California in a way that feels like it grasps the full picture and doesn't pull away from Native viewpoints, we'd love to hear that. And feel free to answer in the chat, or I'm okay with not raising hands at this point if folks want to just jump in. And I'll sit on this one for about a minute or two. And if folks just want to think about it a bit more, that's okay too. Okay, I'm going to go backwards. And that was not backwards. So the Youth Council has several questions. I think primarily this is part of the scoping. And so are there, let me move my, sorry, technical difficulties abound. So how can the council best engage with the California Native youth population? What platforms and messengers are most effective? Are there key partners that the council can work with to reach Native youth? Should the youth council subcommittee be modeled on the council structure or something else? Should the youth council be focused on California Native youth or open-ended? How should the council define youth? And are there ongoing youth groups or meetings in the community that the council can plug into? And are there any youth graphic artists that the council should work with on promotional materials? And these questions are also in the chat right now, where you can both submit a fillable form or you can just take a look at the questions. So I'll pause now. One thing is that we're also open to coming to existing mechanisms where there will be a lot of Native youth. Last week I spoke with the American Indian Chamber of Commerce, or Junior, I think they call it. And so things like that, where we've already got a captive audience and we can talk to them about some of the things that they might want to do with something like this. Okay, I'm going to go backwards again. So academic partnerships. What should the goal of the final report be? And this question is really aimed at scoping. And so if the goal is, or if there's multiple goals, because there can be, so if the goal is policymaking, that is a certain type of structure and that is a certain type of outcome. And so if policymaking, then you're looking at real life deliverables that you can take to the legislature, you can take to the federal government, or you can take to the administration and say, like, hey, look, these are things that are in this report that we think can be helpful. And a good example of a policymaking report is probably the child welfare report that was done with the joint collaboration of the Attorney General's office a few years back, where it had actual deliverables that the state could do within certain timeframes. If the goal is to be more of an academic historical record that is inclusive of and prioritizes Native modes and methods of experiential and historical transmission, that is a different thing. And it can be both of those things. It can be two things with different parts. So that is a way of thinking about the outcome that helps inform the research agenda from the academic partnership perspective. And so that goes into the second question: how should the council frame its research agenda? And so that's the same thing, is or a similar thing, is what, you know, what are the anticipated outcomes, goals of the research that the council is doing? And what is the goal here? Is it to prioritize Native voices? Is it to prioritize a bigger picture understanding of how everything fits together in California? Other things like that. How can the council be most inclusive, incorporating research and narrative into this work? This is a similar type of idea of how can the council incorporate both research that is inclusive, so has Native viewpoints and is done by Native people, but also narrative as well, and how does that get wrapped in? And then, are there preferred academic partners that the council should be speaking with, or preferred models? Again, we're happy to take names, take partners, take models that look like they work. There's a lot of latitude for this council, but I think that they would appreciate having some models to work from. This also, conversely, on, I would hope, a confidential basis, we're also willing to hear about folks that the council shouldn't work with, whether it's because, you know, there is a pattern of extraction from Native communities, there's a pattern of disregarding confidential information or preferences or traditions of the tribe. So we're okay with having those conversations as well, to make sure that this whole process has integrity. How should the council archive testimony received? Where should the data and information live? And we've gotten some feedback on this. And I think this question is mostly aimed at both ensuring that there is a long-term plan for the data collected, so that it's not just sitting somewhere on a shelf somewhere, and that it's actually used. But also, what's the most respectful way to do that, and what kind of information can be in there, with the idea that, you know, sometimes this can be an extractive type of thing depending on who's in charge. And so anything we do now, we don't want to be used against Native communities later. And then also from the Maine Wabanaki Council, we heard that there was a lot of thought put into who should house the data, given the awful history of, you know, extractive practices, of just neglect and the like. So there they made a conscious choice not to house the data within the state. In the state, but not in the state, like the construct of the state. And then, are there higher education serving community organizations or conferences that the council can plug into? And so, you know, we've heard of a couple. There's one down in Riverside that we've heard of. There's a couple more that the partnerships members are that sit on, but if there's others, we'd like to be creating a dynamic listserv of folks who are interested in working on this, and make sure that nobody is left out where they could be helpful. Also, to frame this, there are, let's see, we got about 12 minutes, and I'm going to keep talking until someone interrupts me. So also, the reason we're asking all these questions now is because we're hoping to have an idea of what the community wants and what will be most helpful to the community prior to jumping into the work itself. So this is really informing how all of these structures get created. So when we're looking to have a contract with, you know, an academic institution or a private institution, or house something within state archives itself, those are all things that we want to kind of get in our heads and be accounting for before all of the work is actually done, so that we don't have this back end issue of what do we do next. Same thing with getting everybody to the table that should be at the table. the council doesn't want to get into the meat of the work until everybody who should be at the table has been invited, to the extent that that's possible. And then with the final report, understanding what the goals should be or what they are, and what will be most helpful to the community, that in itself is going to frame how the questions are asked of the community and of academic partners and of elders and the folks that hold a lot of this knowledge. And then scoping the council's work. Again, this is kind of the critical piece. The council's charge is to receive, examine, and report on the history of the state's negative actions toward tribes through the Native lens and experience, and to recommend remedial measures that can be taken. What early state actions should the state be most accountable for from the Native perspective? What state actions have been most harmful to today's California Native peoples? And are there community organizations or conferences that are aligned with the council's work that the council can plug into? The easy one that we've been talking about is the Genocide Conference that takes place in November, but if there are other conferences that are similar to this, whether they're California or international or national, would love to have that be a part of the resources that the council can plug into. And I think those are the questions for the public. And then we had one comment. I'm going to stop sharing in case folks have anything they want to chat about. And again, you can fill in those items at that link that's in the chat. One thing that came in on the chat was also, is there a way to serve folks directly on the ground, whether it's through big times, powwows, other events, to make sure that there is a way for people to plug in places that they're already gathering. So we'll think about that as well. We're also going to try to start doing these listening sessions on a regional basis in the near future, but have not yet scoped that out because there is, again, still some, there's some stickiness with the new variants in the state. So we want to make sure that we're being safe and keeping, doing our part to keep the community safe. But we will likely start doing regional listening sessions, probably still on a monthly basis, with me and Loretta kind of taking different listening sessions throughout the state. And then once we get into the normal times of quarterly meetings, the council itself will also be going throughout the state on a quarterly basis. So we have about 7 minutes left if anybody would like to chat about anything, or if there's anything the council will be discussing on Friday that folks want to think about. Or any feedback on these sessions. We are happy to take any and all feedback and want to be responsive to community needs.
Christina, I just want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon and joining us. I really appreciate the listening sessions, but it's a way for me to hear the community as a whole, not just my community that surrounds me, but the community throughout our region, throughout the state of California. So I definitely appreciate it. And we are looking for ways to to engage everybody, because sometimes I look at these calls and sometimes we have 30 or so more people on the call, and sometimes we have smaller groups. And so just making sure that the word is out, and I know everybody has busy schedules, but you also mentioned, big times or powwows. And I think that's a great way to engage our community. And I know for myself is I feel a little bit more confident in going out and meeting and face to face and doing things. Those are some things that I hope to do as well, to engage our community, just to get the word out there to those that might not yet know when we're meeting, when things are happening, but just to make sure. So if there's any other input that the community has on how we can best gather everybody's information, get everybody a seat at the table, definitely welcome it and would appreciate that information. And thank you again, everyone. Shooteroo.
Thank you, Council Member. And then as we start thinking about being more regionally available in person, we will also keep one virtual day where everybody can come and have a longer Zoom meeting for those that weren't able to attend in person. So just for folks that are wondering about that, I believe we'll probably still try to keep a virtual element of each of the listening sessions, but that's TBD at this point. I did want to remind folks that there's some feedback from past listening sessions on the Tribal Affairs website. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat for folks that want to catch up on stuff, or maybe want to email some of the subcommittees, because the subcommittees themselves are seeking more input. And so in the chat is the community page, and you can go to the blog, which is the catruthandhealing.com. You can also see the dates for listening sessions with participation information, which is always the same every month. And then you can also find listening sessions, recordings, and reports. Last month's report, I am holding up a bit, so we'll try to get that posted today so that everyone has it and we can go over it in the next regular meeting on Friday. And then there's also all of the links that were put in the chat today are pretty much all on that page as well. So if there are things that you're thinking about and that you'd like to chat with the council about, or subcommittees, that will all be on that community page. We're also going to create each council member will have an individual email for the council. And then each region will have an email if there's something that you think should be considered on a regional basis, or that you want to send in anticipation of these listening sessions. But with that, unless folks have any final comments, questions, or concerns, we have about 2 minutes, so we'll wait it out just in case. But also, you are welcome if something occurs to you between now and tomorrow. You're welcome to join us tomorrow, Wednesday, or Thursday. While we like to keep them regional, we are very much open to people joining when they can. So please feel free to join us at this same link as well if you are less comfortable weighing in now but may want to weigh in later. Okay. It looks like folks are kind of trickling out. So if there's no other comments or concerns, Councilmember Bojorquez, would you like to say anything else, or was that your good sign off?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. Again, this is being recorded, so we'll post those as well. And we look forward to seeing you later. Take care, everybody.